Hello, everybody, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Friday, February 12th, 2021. On today's episode, we're going to have a spoiler-filled discussion about Marvel Studios' WandaVision Episode 6, All New Halloween Spooktacular. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Soretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Managing Editor Jacob Hall.
Hello, hello.
And Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
And Brad Oman is, again, not here this week. Hopefully he will be back for the next episode. Jacob, you were almost not here. I heard last night, your power was out in Austin.
Yeah, Texas is being besieged by a major ice storm right now. I lost power for about 12 hours last night. Came back this morning. My internet's been iffy all morning, but it seems to have smoothed out. So if I suddenly vanish from this podcast, don't worry, I'm not dead. I am just battling an ice storm. But here I am. Here I am to be the yes, very low quality Marvel replacement for Sean. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here.
Hey, you have insight, Jacob. We like your insight.
I'll do what I can. I'm looking forward to everybody pointing out how inadequate I am.
Wait, do people actually do that? Do they email you?
Not yet, but they will.
Okay. Okay, as you know, with these episodes, we have 4 segments: feedback, where we answer your emails, our brief reactions, followed by a scene-by-scene breakdown, and to the speculation about future episodes. So we're going to start first with feedback. You can send your feedback to peter@slashfilm.com. I can't guarantee that we'll answer your question on a future episode. As with this show, things seem to be rapidly changing from week to week, so a lot of the emails I tend to get are invalidated by the next episode, but I will try to get to the more interesting, relevant ones for these podcasts. So first, we got one from Chris W. Actually, he tweeted in at us. He said, "I think you nailed it when you said that Wanda can't actually bring back the dead, and I think the introduction of the alternate Pietro further reinforces that. In trying to bring back her brother, the closest she can do is pull in a version of him from an alternate universe. She's trying to create an ideal family, but Vision doesn't remember their life. Her children haven't really had lives, and her brother lived a completely different life than she knows. She's basically surrounded herself with a family of strangers." Any thoughts on that?
It's a great email. I think that is not only makes sense within the world of the show, but makes thematic sense of trying to hide from your grief by surrounding yourself with something and stuff that doesn't actually matter or actually impact you. I like that a lot.
The only thing that I still have some questions about is how involved Wanda actually was in Pietro appearing here, because she seemed really surprised at the end of the last episode, and there are some interactions throughout this episode that we'll talk about that sort of make it seem like she summoned him, but she is still interrogating him a lot of times and testing him and sort of pushing and prodding and trying to figure out exactly what or who or why he is, in a way that I'm not 100% sure that she's fully in control of his appearance. So yeah, we'll get on that later, I'm sure.
Ben, I'm on your side of this. I am not convinced that she's responsible for him being there, but we'll get to that later in this episode. Last week I asked about the mailman, and I theorized that maybe the mailman could be that witness that was in protection. My friend John Armstrong pointed out that the mailman does have a driver's license on the board now, and Agnes is the only one without one. So take that for whatever that's worth. Jeremy N. from Washington, D.C. writes in, "I hate to keep the debate going because it is quite insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but I'm absolutely perplexed by the unanimous opinion on your podcast that the 2 police officers from Westview are from Westview, and that the hex's effect on them was to warp that their heads... was to warp that in their heads that there was a non-existent Eastview. My take on this was that there's 2 officers who were from a different town, Eastview. I think that's the point of Monica saying there's no Westview, but there's an Eastview. She's implying that it's odd that there's an Eastview but no Westview. But on top of that, they're actually from Westview. But on top of that, if they were actually from Westview, where do they go after this discussion? Are they homeless? if their home is outside of the town, do they just stop going to work every day? Where were they outside of the town when the hex began? Then why is their mind and uniform warped instead of just complete erasure of the memory? That they're from Eastview is just a much simpler explanation and doesn't create so much necessity for creating explanations by viewers instead of the show. So I wanted to ask you, Jacob, because I don't think you've answered this question. We've been talking about this for the last couple episodes. These two policemen who say they're from Eastview and say that Westview doesn't exist. Are they from Eastview? Like, does Eastview exist, or like were they changed? Were they from Westview, and they believe that they are now from Eastview?
I think the listener / writer in is, excuse me, completely correct. I didn't realize there was a debate about this. I thought that was a joke. I thought it was a joke in episode 4 is that Westview doesn't exist. Where are you from? Eastview. If there's an Eastview and they're ignoring the Westview, I thought that was like a very on the nose bit of joke to actually emphasize what this reader is saying. I'm completely on his or their side.
Ben, any defense to the Eastview is Westview contingent?
I would have to rewatch that interaction, and as this emailer mentions, it is proven to be so insignificant that I think we've already spent too much time talking about it.
Okay, fair enough. Scott A. from California writes in episode 5, the moment where Agnes said, "You want me to hold the body," gave me serious Rosemary's Baby vibes. In that movie, Rosemary's neighbor, Minnie, while much older than Agnes, manipulated Rosemary into delivering the Antichrist while serving her mysterious drinks. You know, there was mention of a dark liquor here. With speculation of Mephisto being a possible part of the series, I definitely felt a major connection. Did anyone else feel any Rosemary's Baby vibes with this whole sequence?
It's a really good catch, and one that does feed into Agnes's increasingly sinister behavior, especially in recent episodes. And as somebody who was originally not on board with the whole Agnes is secretly somebody else fan theory, who's proven increasingly incorrect by that, I'll eat my words hardcore on that. I think there's something there, and the fact that she is wearing a witch costume as current one, and that she either could be one of several witchy or demonic Marvel characters. I think the people who make this show are clearly well-versed enough in pop culture knowledge to quote Rosemary's Baby, even subtly. So, yes, I would not be surprised at this point.
You know, we'll get to this later, but I'm every week I'm like flip-flopping on if I believe this whole Agatha Harkness thing. And this week I feel like I'm on the side of like, I don't think it's true. But we'll get to that later. This one's a little bit crazy. I'm going to say that ahead of time, but I thought I was interested enough to mention it. Friend and occasional Slash Film contributor Nate Pester wrote in, I know there's a lot of crazy rabbit hole deep dives about all the tiger imagery in the last episode, especially whenever Agnes was on screen. There's the quote that Agnes makes about there's no taming this tiger, about her off-screen husband Ralph, who, by the way, there's a lot of theories revolving around Ralph and who is Ralph. Is Ralph the witness? Is Ralph Mephisto? Like, you know, people, because Ralph has never shown up on screen, a lot of people have been wondering about Ralph. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. There's also a tiger table decoration when Agnes appears with the doghouse. There's also this weird golden throne that Santa Vision sits on during the opening credits that has this tiger-like armrest. We know that WandaVision leads directly into Doctor Strange 2, but there was also leads directly into Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi was supposed to be the first Marvel movie to directly follow WandaVision before Black Widow in Eternals got delayed. What if Agnes is really the white tiger from the Sons of the Tiger? Both Robert Diamond and Abe Brown appear in the fake credits, who are already members of the Sons of the Tiger, and Agnes's brooch could be one of those mystical amulets that gives her powers. I'm not saying Agnes is going to start doing kung fu soon, but could this be a reference to the Ten Rings at all? Jacob, I have to throw this to you because this seems crazy to me, but I don't really know. I can't connect the comic book dots here.
This is a super deep cut, even so far beyond my corner of Marvel knowledge. So heads up, like real big props to Nate for pulling this one out. However, I do think that if Ralph is somebody, My personal theory, having not been on this show for a few episodes, is that if Ralph could be Mephisto, and I think we've seen Ralph. I think he's the animal who's been in every single episode of the show, whether it be a rabbit or a claymation shark. There's been an animal in every episode who, and you know, devil takes many forms. And if Agnes is Agatha Harkness, if she is a witch, maybe she is working for Ralph, Mephisto, trying to deliver something to him. Maybe Wanda's children, for instance. I don't know. I'm just throwing out my little corner of Marvel knowledge. So I think that there is something here. I'm not sure if it's connected to Shang-Chi, but I do think Ralph is someone we have seen but not know it.
You know, in my research for this podcast every week, I do a lot of like looking on Twitter, looking at other people's theories and stuff like that. And I have not heard this animal theory. This is like a new one, Jacob. So
really, yeah, there's a lobster, there's a rabbit, there's a dead dog, and very tellingly, there's a claymation shark in this one, not to get ahead of ourselves, who literally does a devil's curse with a starving claymation child and gives him magic that kills him. So I think there's something to be read there.
Okay, George from Johannesburg writes in with a theory. I was paying attention to Monica's words after she shot at her outfit. Monica says Wanda is manipulating reality, and we see her clothes changed from when she entered and remained the same as the sitcom reality when she was thrown out. Could this imply that Wanda is actually using the hex to fix Vision's corpse so that he comes out alive at the end of the show? The trailers show him trying to escape. Maybe he comes out alive. You know what? I put this in here before I actually saw this episode, and I think this episode kind of proves this wrong, right? This theory that he could come out alive.
Yeah, it certainly seems like he is experiencing some malfunctions and some ill effects from trying to escape the hex. Yes.
Okay, we'll move on from that. Jordan from Seattle writes in about our debate on whether Pietro reveal at the end of the episode require too much work or knowledge from fans ahead of time. I think this mainly came from your Ben's conversation with David Chen, in which David was kind of wondering if people who had not seen the X-Men movies, would this moment still mean something to them at the end of the last week's episode. Jordan wrote in, he said, well, I've watched the MCU movies. While I've watched all the MCU movies, I haven't watched any of the X-Men movies other than Logan in the past 15 years. So I had no idea that Pietro's actor was from the recent X-Men movies. And the moment was still awesome. Confusion, wonder, why'd they recast him? What's going on? And by itself, I just loved it. Once I learned later the next day on Twitter who the actor was, it was even better, but I definitely didn't feel lost or frustrated without the knowledge. In my opinion, some people might be overthinking things and underestimating both Marvel's ability to be accessible and less knowledgeable fans' ability to enjoy the story on its own merits. So, Jacob, you weren't here last week. What did you think of that moment at the end of last week's episode?
It's a super cool moment and one that really blows some doors wide open. And I did think about this too. I really thought, is this a moment people will appreciate? And my joking thing is that whenever I think there's something too confusing in Marvel, I call my mom, because she watches a lot of Marvel stuff, and I find out, did she find it confusing? But she's behind on WandaVision, so I couldn't lock this one in. But I'm glad to hear that it played for somebody who isn't as keyed in as we are.
Yeah. Okay, let's go into brief reactions. Ben, I haven't heard much from you yet, so let's start with you.
I thought this episode was okay. It sort of felt like it's just, the story is like chugging along a little bit, and it's sort of, confirming some stuff that we've been theorizing about for a while. And, I like the production design elements and the costumes and the throwbacks and little Easter eggs and references and stuff like that. But in terms of like the episode overall, I didn't really feel much when I was watching it. I wasn't like super emotionally invested in ways that I have been in the past. It's sort of, I don't know. It felt kind of like it was spinning its wheels a little bit. But yeah, I also just watched the episode one time for today, right before we started recording. So normally I watch it twice before we do this. So maybe if I were to watch it a second time, I would pick up on more things or sort of be hit in emotional ways differently than I was just on one viewing. But that's where I am right now.
I mean, I do agree with you. It's probably less emotional than some of the past episodes. I think I liked it more than you. Last week, I feel like I was very down on the sitcom aspect of the show. Like I felt like it didn't really capture the 80s sitcoms that I loved. And even like the whole special episode, it's kind of a downer. It didn't really, like, the jokes weren't kind of hitting for me and stuff like that. And I feel like this week's episode kind of flipped it for me. Whereas like this kind of captures the late 90s, early 2000s TV sitcoms. And it kind of does it in a way that I wish the last episode did with the 80s. It's just, the tone is perfect. The talking to the camera, the whip pans, the flashback, the score, all the comedy, like it all like really hit for me. What didn't work for me were last week, the MCU stuff worked for me better than the sitcom. This week, the MCU stuff, I was like, this sort of stuff kind of feels like phase 1 Marvel Shield silliness to me. So I don't know. I think like Hayward is kind of over the top. I don't know. I guess I got to see more of that. I love the Halloween costumes. I love how these episodes are no longer just tackling, being a tribute and parody of the sitcoms of the decade, but also tackling like, the special episodes. Like last week was, the very special episode. This was like the Halloween episode. I like that it's doing this kind of new fun things. I think where this is headed at the very end of this episode is really compelling to me. I'm very excited about it. Jacob, what did you think?
I think I'm a little warmer than both of you. It's definitely a plot-heavy episode. It's an episode that feels really compelled to accelerate the plot, pedal to the metal, and get us into a position for the end game, the final 3 episodes of the show. And maybe it suffers a bit for that. But there are really arresting, haunting moments in it. I think all the stuff with the Vision alone on the edge of town is really creepy in a way that the show is really good at capturing. And and as somebody who grew up watching the Nick and Night stuff, so was familiar with the early episodes, seeing like the late 90s, early 2000s sitcom stylings of, My Name is Earl, or more specifically, Malcolm in the Middle, or maybe even like Arrested Development, seeing that being so captured so perfectly, I feel weirdly attacked because this is the stuff that I grew up watching very specifically. And it's just a reminder that I think that maybe the 90s were the worst possible time for aesthetics in any period in human history. And I find it really skeeves me out by how gross this style is. The music and the fonts and the wardrobes. I hated it all so much, but in a way that's very accurate. But yeah, in addition to it capturing that style, I think really well, that very specific early single camera sitcom style. I like the plot pieces coming together. I get that maybe it's not as evocative or as emotional or as thematically interesting as the past few were, but this is a plot episode, and as far as plot episodes go, I thought I got the job done. But I'm also not going to sit here and like say you two are wrong for not thinking it's the best episode, because it's not the best episode. It's a plot episode.
I do feel that scene that you're talking about, where Vision's walking down that cul-de-sac and nobody is moving, or they're kind of like in a cycle of actions. I think that would have played better for me like a couple episodes ago, when I think I know where things are going, and it doesn't register as like as striking as like the other moments in these shows, like that moment at the dinner in the first episode, or when Geraldine mentions Ultron. Those kind of moments in the show, or like when Vision is kind of has this flash of he's dead. I feel like the moment it is very striking. It's striking imagery, and I really like it. But I think we all kind of have some idea of what's going on, and that kind of takes a little bit out of it for me. I don't know, but
you're not incorrect. But I think that Vision doesn't know what's going on, and somebody who's invested in Vision at this point, I think Paul Bettany's good enough to put me in his shoes and to sell that horror as an actor. So you are not incorrect once again. I think nobody's ever incorrect, Peter. We're all friends here. But I do think that the scene works because Bettany's that good of an actor.
I think you hit it for me. I think I have problems in movies when I am way ahead of the character that we're supposed to be like. I mean, I think Vision is kind of more of the protagonist of this story than Wanda. So I like him. I feel like we are so far ahead of him at this point that it's kind of frustrating. But I don't know. Maybe he's going to catch up by the next episode. So, okay, let's go into the beat by beat. The title of this episode is the all new Halloween Spooktacular. Great title.
What a fantastic! Sorry, what a fantastic title. I love it so much. I just feel like it would have been really easy to do another sitcom episode, another let's do Fresh Prince and later seasons of Full House, or even Everybody Loves Raymond. But instead, they went right to this very specific era. And like I said, I think that more like you said so yourself. You think the '80s they kind of missed their mark a little bit, and I agree. But I think the '90s stuff here, down to this title, is so evocative of me at 13 or 14 watching this crap.
Yeah. By the way, they've said that this show takes place a few weeks after the events of Endgame, the blip. And Endgame takes place in October 2023. So I kind of wonder, not that this matters, but I wonder if this episode is actually in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's actually set on Halloween in 2023. I'm sure that won't come to play in any way, but it was just something I was thinking about. So, okay. I also want to mention that the Previously On does not address Pietro being from the X-Men movies. They showed a clip from Ultron, and they could have easily shown a clip from the Fox movies with Darcy talking over why did they recast him or something like that to let the audiences that don't know, but they chose not to story-wise. So I think that's interesting. The opening and the whole sitcom kind of inspiration of this episode, I think it seems largely inspired by Malcolm in the Middle, which I've only seen one episode of, but it seems like, Jacob, you were a huge fan of Malcolm in the Middle, it sounds like. So did this really capture that?
Yeah, I want to say it's one of those shows where I watched it a lot when I was younger, especially in those early seasons, and I trailed off pretty hard as it went on. But yeah, this is from this kid, from the precocious kid talking to the camera, to the stylized opening credits, to the manic flashbackness of it all, just like these joke after joke and people screaming constantly. This is a really pitch perfect replica, a fetishization, if you will, of the Malcolm in the Middle formula, in a way that gave me like I said earlier, very strange flashbacks to my youth in particular, not youth, but actual watching things because I want to watch them youth. Ben, were you watching Malcolm in the Middle or this era of sitcom? Did it register for you at all?
My wife watched Malcolm in the Middle. I missed that entire show. I don't think I've ever seen a single episode of it. And I was just looking this up when you were talking, and it looks like Malcolm in the Middle premiered on January 9th, 2000 and ended in 2006. So I wonder if we sort of missed a 90s episode, or if that 80s episode that we're talking about last week, Peter, that didn't really work for us. If a part of the reason maybe that it didn't quite work is because it was sort of blending the 80s and 90s stuff together. Because I know that there's a Modern Family themed episode, if you will, coming up, because we've seen some of that in upcoming trailers. And that seems like it has to be, the next decade, like the 2010s to 2020 kind of period. So if this episode is actually early 2000s, then it sort of feels like we skipped the 90s. But I don't know if that matters at all in the grand scheme of what this show is doing. But I think we'd all just assumed there's 9 episodes. Each one is going to be tackling a different decade, and it seems to not quite be playing out that same way.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I would actually say last week's episode, to me, the reason why it didn't connect in the way I wanted to is, I was born in the early 80s, and I think last week's episode was more influenced by the early 80s sitcoms than it was the late 80s that I would have grown, would have grown up watching, more like Family Ties or
which actually makes the blending of the 90s stuff, or maybe the loss of the 90s stuff, even more of a stark thing, right? Because if it's if that episode was primarily early 80s and then it skipped not only the late 80s but all of the 90s and just jumped straight to the early 2000s, that's a pretty big leap in time. But anyway,
that's a good note. Okay, so this opening is fantastic. I want to note that Agnes is in it, and she's wearing the word "naughty" written on the back of her pants. Was notable enough that the text to speech for the the blind person, the audio track for people who can't see well, actually noted that. So whatever, I think that's funny. And of course, Pietro gets played by himself in the credits, and the theme song says, "We never know who is coming by to play." So, Ben, do you have any thoughts on the opening?
Well, because I didn't watch Malcolm in the Middle, I can't say like how accurate it was, but it definitely felt like a good, approximation of that kind of generic like style kind of stuff. So I don't have any like specific call outs there, but it felt it was shorter than the previous one, which I appreciated.
Yeah, it almost like felt like Pete and Pete to me, but maybe that was just the song that was playing. Okay, Billy talks to the camera while wearing a Halloween costume. This Halloween costume is this dark blue costume with a red cape. Looks a little familiar to me. Almost looks like Doctor Strange. Jacob, I got to hand this to you because you could probably tell me why.
Yeah, he's actually wearing the costume of Wiccan, who is the older version of this character in the Marvel Comics, who, as discussed in previous episodes, these characters have a very turbulent, weird history of being actual children and then not being children and then being reborn and reincarnated and then dying again. But the teenage version, who becomes a young Avenger of this character, who's his name Wiccan, who has his mom's magical powers, has this costume, the headband, the red cloak, the blue outfit. There's definitely Doctor Strange in there, but this is a homemade version of that not so famous costume, unless you're someone who reads Marvel Comics, which is really fun to see because I said this in a previous episode, but I genuinely think we're going to see a Young Avengers movie or TV show within the next decade, and I think this is the first card being played that direction.
I didn't do the research on this, but does that character become the Sorcerer Supreme at some point?
I am not enough of a Young Avengers fan to say yes or no, but he definitely has a lot of crossover. I mean, more so in the comics, Wanda and Doctor Strange are actual magic users as opposed to Wanda being a subject of experimentation.
Yeah.
If you're this is why you get Sean for these when he doesn't show up, so it makes the show worse, Peter.
Well, I read that someone said that on Twitter, so I think that's true. But I have not that one I did not actually research because I thought you would know. So
look, I actually have read the original Young Avengers run from that first published, and it's very, very good, and I like these characters a lot. But to tell you I have followed them since then and I've read all Young Avengers comics, I would be lying to your face or to your voice, Peter.
I'm looking this up as we speak, and I don't know. Looks too complicated for me to answer. It looks
Peter,
like it.
Keep the recap going. I will figure this out within the next 5 minutes. Ask me in 5 minutes to explain the answer to this question again, and I'll have an answer.
No, he eventually became Sorcerer Supreme of Earth, replacing Doctor Strange. So it is a similar costume. So there we go. Okay, so Wanda is. I mean, everybody's wearing some great costumes here. Wanda's wearing her Scarlet Witch costume from the comics, and so is Vision, who thinks he's wearing like a pro wrestling costume, like a luchador or something. We get a flashback to the Halloween when her and her brother got typhus, and Wanda remarks that that's not how she remembers it, to which Pietro comments that she's probably suppressing the trauma. A little on the nose, right? But funny. Also worth noting that Pietro notes how lame his costume was, and on further inspection and from some tweets I saw on Twitter, he seems to be wearing a Nick Fury costume, or maybe he's just wearing a bad costume with like an eye patch, but it looks like it could be Nick Fury. And a lot of people on Twitter are saying Wanda is wearing an outfit and her hair's the style of Black Widow. But I'm not quite sure that fits because she's also wearing like antennas. What do you guys make of this? Like, is this supposed to be Black Widow and Nick Fury? Like, I don't think anybody would even know who Black Widow was at the time that they were children, right?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering when you posted this earlier in our Slack. I was kind of wondering like when, like what year did Black Widow become active? And I feel like she, even if she was sort of, spying around Eastern Europe or whatever at that time, I feel like she would have been sort of undercover or like not a public figure in the same way that she is, post the Battle of New York, where she's like part of the Avengers and probably school children know who all of these people are. So the idea that like a very young Wanda, I'm just not sure, or yeah, a very young Wanda would be dressing up as Black Widow. I don't know if the timeline really works on that, but maybe it's just a fun little nod that's not supposed to be literal, but just like, well, we had to dress these kids up in something, so here, let's do a little kind of call out to another Marvel thing. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't think Tony Stark would have let her infiltrate Stark Industries if there would, she was so well known that little kids were dressing up as her
Right.
around the world for Halloween. So, as HT said in our Slack channel when I was trying to get to the bottom of this, it's not like Black Widow invented the side braid. So, okay.
Oh, Peter, I looked up the specifics for you as promised.
Yes.
Wiccan becomes Sorcerer Supreme in a glimpse of a possible future where Doctor Strange is retired and he's taken over. So that's our full answer.
Okay, so Wanda is unhappy to learn that Vision is going out as part of the neighborhood watch and can't join them for trick or treating. Pietro offers to help escort the kids and even speeds away with Tommy to return with matching speedster costumes. We then cut to Sword Base, where Monica and Hayward get into a bit of an argument. Monica argues that if Wanda is the problem, she also has to be their solution. And Hayward says that Monica hasn't been a help since she's been there to the mission, and that her love of superpowered individuals due to her past relationship with Captain Marvel is, clouding her vision. He says that people who were blipped away have no idea what it was like and what it took to keep the lights on. And Hayward says that she doesn't have the stomach for this job and has her, Darcy, and Wu escorted out. The three of them somehow take out some sword soldiers with their limited combat experience. And this whole thing feels really silly to me. I'm not sure if it's the actor that plays Hayward it's just so bad. Like, is it just me, or like, is this whole thing kind of silly?
I think it sucks. Like all of the sword stuff in this entire episode, I found to be just excruciating. And a lot of it throughout the whole season, frankly, has been pretty rough. I mean, I think when Darcy and Jimmy Woo first show up, it gave a little bit of life to it, and I appreciated Monica's introduction with the flashback in the hospital and stuff like that. But otherwise, I think the sword stuff has been like a huge it just sort of grinds everything to a halt. And I understand like that you need that, and it has to to make this plot function. It's a necessary prong of this multi-pronged story. But man, I just wish it was written better. And I think you nailed it, Peter, when you said it just sort of feels like phase one, like, yeah, just like old, boring, Shield stuff. Like just, yeah. There's gotta be a better way to pull this off. And I mean, I'm not a professional writer, so I don't know how to do it. But as a viewer, I sort of cringe when I watch this stuff, because it just feels like so flat and uninteresting to me.
I mean, I get that Hayward is supposed to be a dick, and I'm sure we're gonna find out he's one of the villains of the show, but there's no subtlety whatsoever there. It just feels like so on the nose. Jacob, what do you think of Hayward and Shield?
No hard feelings on them, honestly. I mean, they've become like
or
you
Sword.
guys said.
I'm sorry, I said Shield. Sword.
Yeah, like I said, I think Shield phase one is an accurate description here. I'm not mad at it. Like that is, but also I do think this is definitely the weakest aspect of the show. I do think that letting Jimmy Woo win a fight is fine, because quite frankly, I need him to be a winner, Peter. I need the goofy FBI agent to not be just a goofball, to actually be a useful ally in the episodes ahead. So I'm all for Jimmy Woo getting some blood on his fists, and I like those three. I really like their adventures together and them going rogue. But yeah, I do wish that there was a less generic flavor to Sword at this point.
Yeah. And then they go in disguise with the costume or the uniforms from the downed soldiers. Pietro is helping the twins trick or treat. They run up to a house and he yells, "Unleash hell, demon spawn." I wanted to ask you, Jacob, is this just a joke? Is this just funny? Or, we've been talking about Mephisto. Demon spawn might seem like there might be something there.
Yeah, I mean, considering these characters' origins in the comics, where there literally is a deal with the devil, more or less, to bring him to creation, 5 episodes ago, I would have said, "Oh, it's just a joke. That's the kind of joke sitcom uncles make." But I think that is a joke a sitcom uncle makes that feels a little bit too close to everything we've been talking about for 6 episodes now. So I'm not going to say one thing or another. I've already eaten so many words based on my first 2 episodes of predictions, Peter. But I think there's something here.
Well, Wanda is quizzing Pietro about his past, about his different look. And Pietro speeds off with Billy and Tommy. And Wanda says, "Kick ass," which I think is a fun reference to the comic book movie starring Aaron Taylor Johnson, who originally played her brother in Avengers Age of Ultron, alongside co-star Evan Peters, who played Pietro in the X-Men movies and the show. So I thought that was a fun kind of reference. Herb is patrolling the area as part of Neighborhood Watch, but missing all the antics of the twins. She learns from him that Vision is actually not working for the Neighborhood Watch tonight, as he had claimed, and is up to some no good. And Herb is dressed as Frankenstein, which I think you could read a bunch of different meanings here. The Frankenstein, like maybe Vision is Frankenstein. He's brought back from the dead. Maybe I remember a couple episodes ago, there was a moment where Herb was going to tell Vision something and was cut off and said, "We are all ... And I theorized that he might say dead instead of trapped. And what if the people of this town are all dead? I don't know. Jacob, I hate to go to you again, but I know you are our resident Universal Monsters guy. So I got to ask you, what is the metaphor here with the Frankenstein? Or is it just a fun costume?
I think it's just a fun costume, but I will say that in Bride of Frankenstein, as the castle crumbles around them, or the laboratory crumbles around them, Frankenstein's monster does shout out, "We belong dead." But I think that's me stretching way too much. I think it's just a fun, generic Halloween costume. But I've been so wrong, Peter. I've been so wrong.
I think we know that these people are not dead because of the way that Vision tapped into his co-worker's head in the last week's episode. And he does it again with Agnes here, and we can talk about that in a few minutes. But just the way that he sort of unlocks and gets under the this version of themselves that Wanda is sort of projecting or forcing them to inhabit. He unlocked the real guy who was trapped in there. And we see in this episode, this woman who's crying a single tear as she's doing this repetitive motion. I feel like, dead people wouldn't be behaving in that way. So I think it's more of a sunken place kind of scenario.
I don't know, Ben. They seem like zombies to me. And you know what zombies are? They're dead. So okay, I'm gonna beat this theory until it's disproven completely. Okay, so Vision is walking in another street in this town, and he sees a woman in the front yard cycling through the same motion over and over again, and she has a tear coming down her cheek. The husband in the background is setting a jack-o'-lantern on the front porch of the house over and over again. Ben, what do you think is going on here?
Yeah, that's what I was just referring to. I think it's just further confirmation based on what we saw last week that there are real people inside of these bodies that may appear to be just smiling avatars of neighborhood fun, but are actually people who are in incredible pain, who are being forced to behave this way to sort of fit in with Wanda's vision of utopia. So I think it's just another physical representation of the fact that maybe Wanda's power set is she's starting to, it's kind of an extension of what we were talking about last week. Is she just getting a little bit lazy and letting her guard down because she no longer wants to hide? And or is all of this requiring so much power that she is like no longer capable of like keeping up the the facade on the level that she once was when Westview first started. Like, you see all these people sort of on the edges of the town and stuff. We'll talk about that. But the fact that this woman is like openly crying maybe indicates that that some of that humanity is like actually able to escape now. So maybe slowly over the course of the rest of the season, we're going to be able to see more signs of these people sort of trying to burst out of their own their own entrapment, I guess.
Okay, let's talk about this commercial, because I think this is one of the most vague commercials yet. Like, I've seen a lot of interpretations online, and it doesn't seem like in the previous ones, it seems like most people have the same idea, and this one there's different ideas here. Okay, so this is a rad 1990s claymation commercial. A kid is stuck on a stranded island, dying of hunger. A shark wearing sunglasses, shows up and tosses him some food, a yogurt cup, but the kid is unable to open the cup of Yo Magic. We fast forward through time until the boy dies and turns into a dead skeleton laying on the beach. The tagline is "The snack for survivors." It's also like probably the most dark commercial yet. So, Jacob, you were mentioning the shark and stuff earlier, so I wanted to get what do you think this commercial is?
Oh, like I said, if this crackpot animal theory has any water, it really leads to the idea of each animal's presence being somehow satanic, or Mephisto, or connected to that in some way. But there's definitely a deal with the devil happening here. Idea of, here's some food to help you survive, but being unable to open the food and wasting away, being unable to control the magic, the Yo Magic, so to speak. So if we're dealing with the idea of all these commercials being tied to Wanda, her origin, or what's actually happening to her, then the idea of making a deal with the cool shark, aka maybe the devil, to have exactly what you need. Here's what you want. You need this food. You need your family back. You need a family. But it's all going to die around you, is how I read this.
Ben, I'm guessing you have a different interpretation.
Well, it's interesting because I just thought about this as we were talking. I couldn't quite wrap my head around an analysis of what this thing might be, and I like Jacob's idea, but I also just remembered from my trapped in old portions of my brain. I had a minor in classical studies when I went to college, so like Greek and Roman mythology and history and stuff like that. And there's this this myth of Tantalus, this character in Greek mythology who like he's punished by basically like not being able to. So the Wikipedia page says he was made to stand in a pool of water beneath a fruit tree with low branches, with the fruit ever eluding his grasp and the water always receding before he could take a drink. So it's like this sort of this sort of like punishment of like, these things being so close and yet so far, and you never actually being able to get this stuff. And it sort of reminded me of that, this kid like having food on this island, having this food handed to him, but him being too weak to actually open this thing up. And it, this sustenance is right there, but the tragedy of not being able to access it. And then it also, there was one of the previous commercials had some like Greek mythology sort of imagery in there with like people wearing togas. And I don't remember exactly what the product was for, but it was like a couple episodes ago, and somebody was like,
it was Hydra Soak.
Yeah, the soak one. It might have been. Yeah. And I think there were people like waving palm fronds and stuff. And I want to say that they were wearing, if you go back and look at the aesthetic of that, I think it's sort of in line with like the, Clash of the Titans esque aesthetic of what we envision like Greek mythological figures to be. So maybe there's some sort of tie in there. I don't know what that would be really exactly, but that the myth of Tantalus jumped into my head as we were talking just now.
Ben, you are completely correct. This is actually a really, really cool comparison. And I will say that I do think that since the Marvel Universe versus, demonic figures aren't necessarily defined by Judeo-Christianity, the idea of our shark being an all-encompassing force of godlike evil from any corner, any like monolithic, human read, I think we had the same theory, but from different directions.
But the previous commercials have all dealt with like Wanda's traumas from her past. And this one doesn't seem to be that. I don't know. My first thought was, does the yogurt represent Wanda's magic and the person is Vision, and without her powers, he's dead? I talked to my friend John Armstrong, and he suggested that like maybe it's saying that magic doesn't bring back the dead. That's why only survivors can open and eat yo magic. I don't know. Others online I saw theorizing that this could be about the snap. I think it's that word survivors. At the end it says the snack for survivors. I also was thinking like Wanda and Pietro were left starving in the rubble for days as children, and then Hydra gave them magical powers, but they didn't die. Or I guess he ended up dying. I don't know. I'm just wondering, how is this personal to Wanda? Like I do like what you're saying, Ben, and that gives it a much deeper interpretation. But like, how is this personal?
I wonder if it's about the son, like, you know, because we see later that one of her sons has that sort of the same magical abilities or similar magical abilities that she does. So maybe it's about the kid, like not being able to fully harness his powers. Maybe it's like a portentous vision of things to come kind of thing, and not necessarily directly tied into Wanda, but more into her children, since they're becoming, you know, more central figures in the show.
Okay, we'll get back to this a little later because I think I have more to say a little bit. Wanda, Pietro, and the twins walk through the town square. There's a movie theater in the background, and it's playing The Parent Trap and The Incredibles. One movie is about a super family with super kids with power similar to Wanda and Pietro, and the other movie is about a set of twins who switch places, which is kind of funny. So I love that reference.
I guess The Incredibles came out in 2004, and I think The Parent Trap was the late 90s. So maybe this is a way, you know, there's no way that both of those movies should be playing in the same theater at the same time, but maybe this is just the show's version of like trying to nod to the fact that this is taking place in like an amalgamation of those two time periods. I don't know.
But Ben, where was the rep screening of 1960s Parent Trap?
I guess it could have been, yeah.
Also, it should be known that Night of the Living Dead is playing for the Halloween Festival, the movie that anyone who has a Halloween festival uses that movie because it's public domain. So I don't think we need to find any. Are there any like clues hidden in Night of the Living Dead for this, or is it just the fact that is the go-to public domain horror movie for any single Halloween scene?
Peter thinks that everybody's dead, so
I mean they are zombies kind of later in the episode, so maybe there's something I don't know. I did write down that film nerd thing about The Incredibles being released in November 2004 and Parent Trap being released in July 1998. But I mean, Jacob could be right that this could be like one of those movie theaters that we have in LA where it's always showing like older movies. Or I guess if this is supposed to take place in the 90s, well, actually we don't know when this is supposed to take place, do we? It could be the 2000s. We could have just fast forwarded to the 2000s as you said earlier, Ben. So, but then like it could be like showing a new movie and an old movie. Okay, I guess we don't need to think about this. It's just a fun reference. Okay, we're getting too concerned with stupid film nerds.
Peter, you forgot the part where The Incredibles and The Parent Trap are both fine Disney products.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. That honestly did not even occur to me, Jacob, which is kind of funny that they're both movies that Disney owns. Okay, that's funny. But they don't own the movie that's playing.
Nobody does. Night of the Living Dead had a copyright misfiling in the 60s, so nobody owns it.
Yeah. Well, Disney could have just put their own. I guess they don't have a zombie movie. They could have put like like that Mickey Mouse, the one that plays with like the cartoon with the what am I thinking? The skeletons and stuff.
If they really wanted to sell me, they would put Mr. Boogedy on there, and that would have been a real Disney Plus deep cut.
Okay, Wanda questions Pietro, and he lays it all out. He's playing his part, quote, to come to town unexpectedly, create tension with brother-in-law, stir up trouble with the Rugrats, and ultimately give you grief. That's his role in this sitcom. And I don't know. I'm still wondering who sent Pietro, because we'll get to that in a second. Okay. Wanda asks what happened to his accent. He basically asks what happened to her accent. The details of his death are fuzzy, he says. He says, I got shot like a chump in the street for no reason at all. And next thing I know, I heard you calling me. I knew you needed me. So this is interesting because in the last episode, when the doorbell rang, she told Vision that she didn't cause this, and I honestly believe her. Like, I don't feel like she was lying to Vision in that moment. And she keeps on asking all these questions that makes me believe that she didn't know, that she wasn't expecting to show up. So if he heard her calling him, I guess I'm asking you guys, like, who actually called him there? Like, did she unexpectedly, like, did she subconsciously call him there from another multiverse? Like, do either of you have any theories on what's going on?
Go ahead, Jacob.
The easy answer is no. I think that it's so intentionally vague. In fact, that he has more awareness than virtually anyone else in this world makes that an even bigger question. What does he know compared to, Vision or anybody else trapped in this world? I was leaning toward a subconscious thing, toward her having ripped him from another dimension because she couldn't, bring back, her actual dead brother. But maybe it is somebody trying to appease her. If there is somebody else pulling the strings, somebody else ripped him from their dimension to fill the gap and make sure her faux family portrait is complete. I'm not entirely sure, Peter, but Ben maybe has something smarter to say than me.
No, I really don't. I think it's one of those two options. I think it's either like the Evan Peters character is somebody that is like the big bad of this series in disguise or something like that, a villain in disguise, or it is a subconscious sort of conjuring of that character that even Wanda isn't fully aware of how or why she brought that character. But I do like the idea, the double meaning of I'm here to give you grief, like the that phrase, working on multiple levels there. So from the very beginning, we've been talking about how this is a show that is going to be about Wanda dealing with this concept of grief and losing Vision and all of that. And it seems like she hasn't really dealt with the Vision aspect as much, but she is and has been over the course of the past couple episodes, like slowly coming to terms with the loss of her brother, which I don't know. This is one of the reasons that, like, I'm disappointed we haven't seen more of these characters in an in-depth way in the MCU before, because Age of Ultron happened so many years ago within the events of the MCU that you would think, and grief is like a super complicated thing, and I don't mean to belittle it in any way, but I feel like Wanda as a character might have been able to, maybe you would assume that maybe that character would have been able to start grappling with that loss earlier than now on the timeline, if that makes any sense.
But in her timeline, she lost only a few weeks ago. She was blinked out, so it's still incredibly raw for her.
I guess that's true, but like, how many years took place between Age of Ultron and Infinity War? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I guess you're right. Never mind.
I don't know the answer of how many years there, but it probably was only a few, right?
I don't know. It strikes me that, like, that relationship between Wanda and Pietro is like the central relationship of the show right now. And it's just surprising. That's all that and we get that moment, and that we'll talk about, I'm sure, in a second, where like she sees his body that's like been riddled with bullets again, and she sort of recoils the same way that she did when she saw the real quote unquote Vision earlier in the season. So just the idea that she's like still grappling with Pietro's loss is just added complexity for the Wanda character, which I appreciate.
Hey, Ben, Wonder Woman is pining after Chris Pine, like, what, decades?
Yes,
decades later.
It is very, very true. Grief is a complicated thing.
Okay. The twins speed off together, and Wanda tells them just don't go past Ellis Avenue, which will come into play later. Monica, Darcy, and Wu break into the server tent, hack into the database, as because it needs to be that silly, like, hack into database type thing. and they find the secret plan, which is the code name Cataract, which I'm guessing has a possible meaning. The only which escapes me. The only thing I can think of is like a silly pun that having a cataract can greatly affect your vision. But Jacob, do you have any theories on cataract?
No, I thought it possibly meant trying to hide something, obscuring vision from somebody, but I think either way, there definitely is a vision pun built into that name.
Yeah. Hayward had found a way to look into the hex and is tracking vision. Not only tracking vision, but he's tracking like every body inside the hex. And Wu notices that the people at the edges of the town are barely moving and asks if they are alive. Again, people are questioning if the people in there are alive, Ben. I'm just saying. Inside the hex, Vision walks down a cul-de-sac filled with unmoving people. He flies into the air, notices that one area of Westview is very busy with activity, but the outskirts are dark and quiet. And I'm guessing that area that's, busy with activity is the one that has Wanda in it. I guess we already answered this earlier on, but like, why are these outskirts like so why are the people not moving? Jacob, you didn't, I think, give a theory on that.
I mean, I think it's just as simple as the people who are not in the proximity of Wanda aren't important and are just going through the motions until they're needed by the plot, whether that be a character or a background actor. They've just been minimized to the point of being shells that are called in when necessary, and are just put in this creepy autopilot when they're not in proximity to the main characters of the show.
Yeah. Vision comes across Agnes in her car, and Agnes is looking very confused. She asks where the town square is, a place that Vision knows very well that she should actually know the location of. Vision unlocks her true self, and Agnes is shocked that one of the Avengers is there to help them. Vision doesn't seem to know what the Avengers are. Agnes questions if she's dead because Agnes notes Vision is dead. And then she tells him that no one leaves and that Wanda won't even let them think about it. Which to me kind of is weird because, in a previous episode, there was a doctor that thought he was going to leave the town. Like there's definitely people thinking about leaving. But anyways, okay, we'll skip over that.
Are they thinking about it in the context of a sitcom plot? He's leaving town because it's a hassle for her to have her doctor go away while she's pregnant. Oh no! Whereas actually leaving out in a way that's not tied to the sitcom plot is a very different thing.
Fair enough. Okay. She starts laughing maniacally, which we should also note what you noted earlier, Jacob, that she's wearing a witch's hat here. But this whole thing confuses me because week to week, I felt that Agnes is responsible for this in some way, that she might be Agatha Harkness, or she's somehow there's pulling the strings. But now she shows up and it seems like she's under Wanda's control. She's very confused. It doesn't seem like she's doing this to trick Vision in some way, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, she shows up at the right moment to possibly distract Vision from leaving the hex. Maybe. But then she has this maniacal laugh and is wearing a witch's costume. So what do you guys have to say about this?
I keep going back to the interview that I did with Jack Schaefer, where I asked her about the red herrings and stuff. And she said that she and her team definitely put stuff in there. And I kind of am wondering if the whole Agatha Harkness thing is just a giant red herring. And she and the rest of the people at Marvel knew that people would draw that conclusion, and especially putting Kathryn Hahn in that witch costume and, having the brooch imagery and all of that kind of stuff. They know that people are going to be paying close attention to this show and drawing those conclusions. So I wonder if it's like a feint, it's just just trying to generate some theorizing and stuff. And it's not actually going to be anything, because it's either that or it's an elaborate troll job, like you mentioned, where she, this entire interaction is just her putting on a performance. But you saw Vision's powers, that yellow lightning, for lack of a better term, shoot out of his fingers and touch her head and seemingly unlock something. And if she's a witch, sure, maybe, you could argue that like she's faking that, or could fake that, or just be a good actress within this world, who could, slip in and out of personas or whatever. But I kind of got the feeling that interaction with her was genuine. And if that's the case, maybe she isn't quite as powerful or as, demonic or whatever as all of the theorizing has sort of lent itself to.
It is very interesting that we are now 6 episodes down of a 9-episode show, and we don't clearly know who the bad guy is. Sure, we suspect, though. I mean, they're clearly trying to lead us believe that Wanda's the bad guy here, but I think there's something more at play, and we know that Sword is involved and Hayward's involved in some way. But it's interesting that we're this far into the plot and we don't have a clear indication. I'm wondering if there's even room to bring in a new character.
Yeah, that's my thought too. Like the further we go, I mean, the fact that Mephisto and Agatha have not been like openly confirmed or like even hinted at, like set up in a blatant way as like the stinger, the final tease of an episode or something like that, makes me think like, the clock is ticking. Like there's not that much time left in this season of television. And for them to, it's a big ask to introduce the literal devil in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and have him, pop in here and then explain how he's been sort of pulling the strings for the past X number of episodes. The more time that goes by without confirming that, the less likely I think it is. But Jacob, I'm curious what you make of that.
Yeah, I mean, just go back to the beginning of the question. I mean, there are 2 obvious reasons here. Since we still have Agnes's face on the board in the Sword headquarters, we never saw that. I have to assume that she's not just another ordinary citizen, which means she either is, pulling a fast one and pretending to be a one of Wanda's prisoners and doing so in a way that that torments him, specifically by saying he's dead, which adds to the devilry of it, or she is somehow involved but got wrapped into it, like a servant of Mephisto or Mephisto. I don't know how you say that. I've only ever read it. First time saying it out loud. And she was, maybe she's serving him subconsciously and got wrapped into it beyond her control. So those are my 2 clear reads on it. But my whole thing is, I don't mind a late villain reveal as long as the reveal is that he or she's been there the whole time, whether it be Agnes herself or it be the many animals that could be Satan watching every episode. A little flashback saying, I've been here the whole time. Flashback to all the scenes where we saw animals. But, late villain reveals, I'm not opposed to it. Like I said, as long as it's not just, here's a whole new character, as long as it is, I've been here the whole time, here's the evidence.
Okay, speaking of third acts, let's get into the third act of this episode. Monica gets a text from her aerospace engineer contact from the last episode and says her way back into the Hex will be there in just an hour, which I take to mean AKA next episode. I guess, Jacob, you weren't here last episode. Who do we think her aerospace engineer, who is her guy?
Oh, I don't want to repeat anything that was said previously, but my first Marvel thought was Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four, maybe even pre-Fantastic Four, but that would involve WandaVision introducing a lead actor from a movie that's not being made for a few more years. So that was my knee-jerk response to a guy who builds spaceships in the Marvel universe. But otherwise, I don't know. I really have no good guess beyond that.
I'm not sure if you've seen this, Peter, but I've seen some speculation that it could be Riri Williams, the character who plays Ironheart, or the alter ego of Ironheart. Because Ironheart, Jacob, why don't you do like a 30 seconds on Ironheart just to like catch people up in case they're unfamiliar?
Yeah, Tony Stark died for a bit in the comics, and a holographic AI version of him mentored a genius young black teenager who builds her own Iron Man suit in her garage, becomes a hero. She's stuck around even after Iron Man came back to life in the comics, and she's getting her own Disney Plus show. So maybe this is where we first see her. Yeah,
and the reason I say that is because or I guess the reason that this theory I think is like picking up a little bit of steam is because they've already cast the person to play Ironheart in the upcoming show, and we don't know exactly when that show is going to come on yet. But casting a person, this early, if they've cast somebody, I think that means it's fair game that they could show up in any Marvel property. So the idea of Maria knowing somebody who is super smart, who might be able to, that would be less complicated than introducing and have less baggage with it than introducing a member of the Fantastic Four. If it's a character that we've never seen so far, Ironheart seems like, a good potential choice anyway.
I like that theory, but she uses the him pronoun. Actually,
that's right. Yeah,
I think
you're right.
Says her guy at one point.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, I guess that sort of throws things off. Maybe it's like Rhodey. Maybe it's War Machine, but is he an engineer? I don't know.
Am I reading too much into this to think, because they've building this person up for 2 episodes now, to think that this has to be someone we know, or like either someone we know or someone that's going to be a character in the future of this MCU?
I think it has to be someone we know, or an important character. If it would be just some rando being like, "Oh, thanks a lot for a," it has to be a cameo from somebody who we know or somebody who we're going to know. I would be disappointed if it was something in between, to be honest.
Okay, so Hayward has Monica's blood work and shows that her cells are abnormal from going through the boundary twice. Darcy hasn't made it through Hayward's last firewall and decides to stay behind as Monica and Wu go to meet Monica's contact. Back in the Hex, Pietro asks Wanda where she was hiding all the kids until now. He assumes that they were just sleeping in their beds. By the way, this is my theory on why the people aren't moving on the edges of the Hex, is because before she had all those kids like in their beds unmoving, and she only had the control of the adults. And now that she has to take control of all these kids running around, that her power is not able to, she's not able to control all those adults and all those kids at one time, is my theory. But I could be wrong. I know this is played for comedy, but Pietro basically lays out the whole thing. He says, no need to traumatize young children aside from a special holiday episode. He says she handled the ethical considerations the best she could. Families and couples stayed together. Personalities stayed similar. People got better jobs. He almost makes it sound like it was a good thing. It was a good thing for everybody involved here. This, to me, leads me to believe that Pietro was sent in here to stop Wanda from feeling guilty, and his purpose here is to keep up the illusion, which is kind of getting shattered at this point. And if you remember the lyrics at the beginning of this TV episode, the lyrics go, "Don't fight the chaos. Don't question what you've done. The game can try to play us, but don't let it stop the fun." So I don't know. Do you think I'm reading too much into that? Like, maybe whoever sent Pietro, whoever's behind him, I feel like it's trying to keep this matrix of sorts going, this reality, and like he sees that it's whoever's in charge of this sees that it's kind of fracturing, and is trying to, for whatever end game, be it the kids or whatever, is trying to keep it still intact with her.
I think you're right, Peter. I think whether Pietro has some control, some free will or not, he is here to do exactly that. And for a woman whose fictional life is falling around her, gifting her dead brother from another world, even if it's still her brother in some dimensional capacity, feels like something sinister saying, throwing her a bone. So I think, especially with those theme song lyrics, you're on something.
I like that idea too, because it doesn't necessarily mean that the X-Men have shown up in the MCU this early in a way that maybe, we were all sort of theorizing about at the end of Pietro's first introduction, because it could just be somebody in disguise, or like somebody, like you said, just like sending this one character in, and then we're going to realize, okay, this is just a costume or a projection, or like, it's not necessarily like the door being fully open, but I think I would like it a lot if at the end of WandaVision, Pietro's appearance here was just to serve the story purpose of this story that they were telling, instead of being, this huge bridge into the multiverse and all of this other stuff that seems like it would need to be handled on a much bigger scale, instead of just all of it being shoved into what is supposed to be a comparatively smaller, Disney Plus TV show. So yeah, I hope you're right, Peter.
Well, we learn here she seems to know that she's doing it, but when Pietro asks how did she manage to do it, she seems confused and admits that she doesn't know how she created this whole thing. She felt completely alone, she says. I felt completely alone, empty, endless nothingness. And the only thing that occurs to me is that kind of feels like that little kid on the island in the commercial. I don't know what that means about that commercial.
The little kid who was suddenly approached by a satanic cool shark who said, "Hey, here's a deal with the devil." That one, Peter?
Yes. Okay, when she looks back at Pietro, he's dead and riddled with bullet wounds. This is the moment that Ben mentioned earlier. Why does this keep happening to her?
Maybe it's just like when she starts grappling with reality in her own mind. It just the illusion starts to break down. Like, she's like almost off in her own world, like really thinking about her situation. And then when she looks back, that this reality has intruded into this space that she's created, or maybe she didn't fully create it. It's help. It's being created for her in some ways too. So yeah, that would be my guess. It's just like anytime she sort of like, has this reverie, these daydreams of like, the real trauma that embracing the real trauma that she's faced in her life. These moments start to slowly creep in.
Yeah. And right about then, Darcy breaks through the firewall and finds the file. We don't get to see what the file is. It's probably important. We're probably going to learn about this next episode. But what do you guys think it is? Jacob, do you have any ideas?
I mean, either a reveal about the DNA of the people who've gone through, something more specific, or confirming that Hayward and Sword are up to no good in a way very similar to what S.H.I.E.L.D. went through in Winter Soldier, which would be a huge disappointment. Because I don't want the same plot line happening again is what I'm very worried about here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it could be, some sort of master plan for like what they intend to do with Vision once they, get their hands back on him again, because it seems like that's the underlying thing is like they don't really give a crap about Wanda. They just want Vision's body back so they can continue their experiments. So yeah, I wonder if it's just like somebody, Hayward was dumb enough to write it down in a memo and save it on a jump drive or something.
Why would he do that?
I don't know.
Maybe it's that whole file, the security cam footage that we already saw. So I don't know what it could be, but I'm sure it's implicating him and what they were trying to do with Vision. Okay, so Vision crosses Ellis Avenue. He tries to push through the boundary. It's really tough because the boundary is trying to pull him back through, pulling pieces of his body back through. Billy can hear what's happening, and for the first time uses his powers, extending a glowing hand, stopping his super speeding brother. They alert Wanda. Pietro says, "Don't worry, it's not like her dead husband can die twice." And with that, she throws him across the town square with her powers. Billy's able to see what is happening in his mind. I guess, Jacob, right now would probably be a good time to ask you, like, what exactly are Billy's powers?
Billy's powers are essentially his mom's powers in many ways. Telepathy, and telekinesis. They're just standard Marvel magical fire things from my hands and mind powers, to be perfectly honest.
Okay, Vision falls to the ground motionless, and Darcy is handcuffed to a vehicle. Wanda freezes Westview and creates a red surge, expanding the boundary of the hex. Sword agents make a run for it, but Darcy is stuck and gets overtaken by the boundary. So we assume that she's now in the hex. The Sword helicopter becomes a hot air balloon. The tents become circus tents. The agents become the clowns that they really are. And Hayward narrowly escapes the boundary in an SUV, but is met with radio silence when he's trying to contact the Sword agents. Boundary overtakes the crappy Westview town sign, and it now looks like a 1950s quaint sign. It says "Home, it's where you make it." The last image of this episode is a close-up of Wanda's face with the scarlet glow fading from her eyes. It's pretty badass. And you know what I really hate, guys, about the show is I hate that fucking standby screen that pops up in an episode when I want to see more of what's going on. Like it always like is like this big like I don't know. It's it's like it's a brick wall that I'm like speeding at like 88 miles per hour and I hit the brick wall. Anyways, any thoughts on the on all that stuff that happened, the expansion of the hex and how I guess the circus has come to town?
Yeah, I wonder if I hope that that Jimmy and Monica did not make it. Like, I hope that they got sucked in just so we can see Randall Park in sitcom form, because I think that would be really entertaining. I mean, he obviously has like sitcom bona fides, and obviously we're going to be seeing Kat Dennings, who also has sitcom bona fides, in the sitcom space next episode. But we never see exactly what happens to Monica and Jimmy. So I'm not sure if they. I like that it was left, mysterious at the end there.
Yeah. Jacob, any thoughts on the ending of this episode?
It's all very big and very expensive and very Marvel-y. It's the most familiar Marvel has ever been in this show so far. But, we're setting up a third act. We're setting up consequences for people's actions and some very big action. So, sure, we need all the big sky portals, but on the ground this time.
Okay, let's jump into speculation here. There's a new theory gaining traction around the internet. I'm not sure I buy any of this, but the theory is that Hayward is somehow controlling the events. That for Eastview Police to be controlled outside of the bubble, someone needs to be controlling them. That some people think he's Ralph, as we've heard. We've always heard about Ralph, but we've never seen him. And that there's something going on with him. Like there's a lot of people point out that when we see his office in, I think like the 3rd or 4th episode of the show, we see his office. The only time a hexagon ever appears in the real world is in his office. On like one of his walls, there's a bunch of frames of like accomplishments, and they're in a hexagon shape. So and also people point out that the word Hayward means someone who guards an enclosure of land. I read someone else pointed out that his name contains all the letters needed for Hydra. So, what, Jacob? Do you think there's more to Hayward than we know? I mean, obviously, there's more to him, that like he was trying to do something with Vision to weaponize Vision. There's some evil there, but is there more than that?
I hope so. If it is what I think it is, it's such a naked retread of Winter Soldier's big twist that there has to be more. There has to be. We'll see.
Okay, where do we think we're going with Wiccan and Speed? Like in the comic book version of this, someone is doing this to them to like steal the children, right? Am I correct on that, Jacob?
Yeah, they're essentially created so that their powers and their physical forms can be repurposed for nefarious purposes. So, which is why Agnes taking a sudden interest in them has upped all the theories about Agnes. And I think there's something there. I think we're staring down the barrel of a earthbound threat from Hayward and a more cosmic threat from Agnes and whoever she may be working for.
Yeah. The whole For the Children thing, there's been a lot made about children on this series so far. I kind of wonder, the comic book ended with no more mutants, right? Like it ended the mutants in the Marvel universe. Am I correct in that, Jacob?
Yeah, it decimated the population of mutants. I believe it erased or removed the powers of 99% of them. I think they left only 100 mutants left for a little while, and I think that was undone a few years after that. But it made mutants an endangered species in the Marvel comic book universe. So I think we're looking at the verge of a reverse of that twist. Is that what you're getting at, Peter?
No, yeah, I think a lot of people are saying that, but I'm wondering. I don't know. I feel like mutants are too early at this point because we don't even. Feige's been saying an X-Men movie is years out. Like, if you introduce mutants this early, we're gonna wait like 3-4 years for an X-Men movie.
That was part of my frustration with Pietro showing up. This version of Pietro, but I think maybe if like I mentioned, maybe it's not as clear of a a bridge directly to that. Maybe it's just like the door is just barely creaking open instead of somebody kicking it down off its hinges. Then maybe I think it would be a little bit more palatable.
This might be the stupidest theory that I have, but I was wondering if you're gonna that's an iconic moment in that comic book series, and if you're gonna try to play with that moment in some way for this TV series, maybe what if Wanda said no more children and all the children in the world disappear?
She got children to met all of us. Peter,
it's pretty dark for a Disney show,
yeah,
Peter.
Yeah. Well, I think it's probably not going to happen because we already have this world-altering event of the blip, and I don't feel like there's a need to add another thing like that in there. But
yeah, they haven't even grappled fully with the consequences of the blip yet.
Yeah, I will say that if Marvel and Wanda create mutants this way, I'd be on board with it purely because there needs to be some time for people to grow wary of mutants and afraid of mutants for the X-Men to have a reason to form. So if they do it now and wait 5 years to make X-Men movie, it would make logistical sense within this world for people to have grown fearful of that.
Yeah, I like that idea.
That's a good point. Okay, they mentioned that Monica got her powers from going through the boundary twice. So Darcy gets sucked in through the boundary. Like, she actually goes through the boundary when it's red. Is Darcy going to get powers?
They specify that that Maria went through twice. So I'm wondering if that is necessary to mess up the DNA enough. But you know what? I am all for Kat Dennings having the ability to fly and shoot things from her hands, Peter.
Peter, can I do like 3 or 4 minutes on Monica Rambeau based on an article that I wrote for slashfilm.com earlier this week?
Yes.
Okay, so there is a character poster that was released of her where she's wearing what appears to be like a white sweater with black on the top of it, sort of in the shoulder area. And then that same sweater, a version of that same look, went on sale at the Disney store earlier this year. And some people have wondered if this is a hint toward Monica's comic book superhero identity, because in the comics, Monica Rambeau has taken on a number of different superhero identities over the years. For a long time, she was known as Captain Marvel. She had a couple of different aliases, including Pulsar, Photon, which was the military call sign of her mother, Maria Rambeau. And then one of them is Spectrum. And as Spectrum, that costume of that Spectrum character is essentially a white and black color scheme that many people are wondering, oh, is this costume that Monica is wearing in this character poster, is she actually going to wear that in the show? Is that a hint that she is going to maybe take on this Spectrum persona within the series? And so in the comics, Spectrum is able to phase through solid matter and sort of manipulate energy fields depending on their wavelength. And we've seen phasing in the MCU before in the character of Ghost in Ant-Man and the Wasp, who had that same type of ability where she could sort of go in and out of walls and things like that. This is sort of a longer stretch here that gets into like the speculation category, but elsewhere in the comics, Spectrum realized that she had transcended humanity with her power and became an immortal being of light, which seems like something that you cannot sustain as a character. Like we've talked a lot about how like Captain Marvel might be like too powerful, and like the Superman problem of like, how do you even tell stories about characters that are that powerful? But in the comics, there was this This big battle, and I'm going to read from the Wikipedia page here. The end of this adventure took the heroes to the entry point to the House of Ideas, a plane of existence and the core of all reality. Monica burned out most of her power, helping Vision reach inside the House of Ideas, becoming the only hero capable to follow this essentially Greek goddess of the night inside and stop her. Due to this exertion, Monica returned to her previous power levels, becoming human again. So the idea that in the comics, Monica makes a sacrifice to help Vision, I just thought was kind of an interesting potential look into what could happen at the end of this series if Marvel does not want the character of Monica Rambeau to come out of this series being a superhero character. If they are instead grooming her for, wanting her to have like a higher leadership role at Sword or something, but want to also nod at, hey, we know from, hey, comics fans, we know that this character obviously gains powers in the comics or whatever. They could give her these powers from going in and out of the Hex and then have her, do some sort of heroic act at the very end of the show to save Vision or save Wanda maybe, because she seems very intent on trying to save Wanda. That could maybe zap those powers away and return her to, normal humanity, if they wanted to take another superhero off the board, while still sort of nodding to the comics fans. So I don't know, just a thought, just a theory I was having.
Wait, why would they give her powers and then take them away in the same show?
Well, because like, what if they don't want? Because if this idea of like her being this immortal being of light, what if she's too powerful now? Where you put your thumb on the scale of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in such a way where adding this character just makes it impossible for any event to happen where already it's stretching the logic to be like, well, why are these individual adventures just not calling in Thor to beat the shit out of these guys with Mjolnir or whatever? And if there's an immortal being of light wandering around on the planet who has, this sort of indefinable power set, if the show introduces her and gives her those powers and then just ends and she's still wandering around, that would be a lot for audiences of who didn't watch WandaVision to just sort of take in another property if Monica just pops up suddenly completely powered up in this way. And then also just the sheer power of it might be something that Marvel might not want that character to have.
Well, we do know that she's going to appear in Captain Marvel too. So yeah, I mean, you make some good points. It could go either way, in my opinion. I feel like
it could be any combination of those things, but just based on that comic stretch, that comic run that I'd never heard of before, I thought that was maybe could lead into some interesting things in the back half of the show.
I do feel like if you're gonna give her powers and you're gonna like have this whole setup and this reveal that she has powers, I would hope that they don't take away the powers like an episode later. Do you know what I mean? We haven't even learned that she has powers yet, and like there's 3 episodes left. So it seems like the timeline is very tight on that for me, but I don't know. Okay, let's is Agnes in on it? What do we Jacob, you think she's in on it right now, right?
She's either directly in on it or she has been sucked into the illusion but was in on it.
Ben, what do you think?
Man, this is like the big thing. I'm right there with you, Peter, where I'm just going back and forth. But like Jacob mentioned, her name is not on that board. She doesn't have an ID. So I think that, is that the thing where like the show is just trolling us? Like, oh, somebody in next episode or something is going to be like, oh, here's the driver's license for this character. It was under a bunch of paperwork, and like they just purposely kept her off the board just to keep us speculating? Or is there really something going on with this character? I don't know. And she was like squirting lavender all over the kids. Oh my God. I can't decide. I feel like she's okay. She's in on it. She's in on it. That's where I'm settling.
I'll take the other side just to have some kind of money in this this gamble. I do think maybe she is the witness and protection, and the reason why we haven't seen Ralph is because there isn't a Ralph. That's like the cover story is like she's living with Ralph, but we don't see Ralph.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's probably not true, but I'm gonna float that out there. I do think it's been very suspicious in the past, but this episode really doubled down on the fact that she was not in on it, that like she's under control. So I don't know. We'll have to see. Okay. I guess one last question for you guys. Uh, is Vision okay? Like, will he be okay in the next episode? Does Wanda have to like rebuild? Like, how does that work? Because he seemed like he was like,
Physically or emotionally, Peter?
I mean, both.
Physically, he'll be fine. I think the Hex is going to restore him, but emotionally, I think Vision has gone past the point of being able to be shuffled back into the show. He is. I think we're going to see a very different Vision next episode.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Okay. That brings us to the end of today's Slash Film Daily. You can find more of all of our work at slashfilm.com. You can find this podcast on Apple, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please do me a favor. Head on over to our iTunes page. Write us like a sentence or two saying why you like the show. That helps more people find the show, and it helps us greatly. It'll take literally 30 seconds of your time, and we will be forever grateful. You can send us your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. And yeah, we'll see you on Monday. Thanks for listening.